The idle speed should automatically drop to its low RPM setting when the vehicle warms up. This is one sign the IAC motor is working. With the vehicle warmed up, turn the air conditioning on maximum. On vehicles without air conditioning, turn the steering wheel all the way hard left or hard right. In either case, the idle speed should increase to compensate for the extra load on the engine. Once again, this increase is caused by a properly functioning IAC motor. Now, turn the air conditioning off or straighten the wheels. Allow the engine to continue running. Locate the IAC motor on the throttle body or port fuel injection unit. Carefully grasp the wire harness connected to the IAC motor and wiggle the wires. Listen for a change in the idle speed that will indicate a poor or partially broken connection. If any changes are noticed, replace or repair the electrical connection and retest. Shut the engine off and allow it to cool down. While you are waiting for it to cool, disconnect the negative battery cable. Use a small flat blade screwdriver to release the locking tabs and disconnect the harness from the motor. Inspect the connection for corrosion and clean as needed with electrical spray cleaner. Remove the mounting bolts, if so equipped, and remove or unthread the IAC motor from the throttle body assembly. On models that have an IAC motor with an exposed pintle, such as this General Motors, begin by examining the pintle closely. Scrapes or rub marks on only one side are an indication of a bent shaft and would require replacement of the motor. Now is also a good time to clean any deposits from the pintle and its seat inside the injector housing. Oftentimes, these deposits can create idle speed problems. Spray oxygen sensor safe carburetor cleaner onto a shop towel and wipe away deposits that may be on the pintle itself. Use the same method to clean deposits from the pintle seat area of the injector. Do not, however, spray carburetor cleaner directly into the cavity. If the deposits were heavy, once they are clean, reinstall the IAC motor and repeat the steps discussed earlier. If you are using a large wrench to tighten the IAC motor, be extremely careful not to over-tighten it, as damage to the IAC motor will result. Now, reinstall the mounting bolts earlier removed and reconnect the electrical connector. If you have an internal pintle design IAC motor as shown, cleaning is not recommended because you may cause damage to the motor. If idle problems still persist, connect an ohm meter across the diagonally positioned terminals. Polarity is not important. Set the ohm meter on the low scale. Your reading should be over 20 ohms if the motor is good. Repeat this same procedure across the other two terminals. If the reading is less than 20 ohms either time, replace the IAC motor. If your vehicle has a 2-pin electrical connector, attach the ohm meter leads to the terminals. A reading of 7 to 13 ohms should be obtained on the low scale. Lastly, set the ohm meter to the 20K or high ohm scale. Connect one lead to one of the terminals and the other lead to the IAC motor housing. A reading over 10,000 ohms should be obtained. If any of your readings are not within specifications, replace the IAC motor.
The first step for testing your idle air control motor is to start the engine when it is cold and verify that it momentarily runs at high idle. As the engine becomes warm, the idle should return to its low setting. This is a sign of a correctly performing IAC motor. With the engine running, wiggle the wires connected to the IAC motor and listen for a change in RPM. A change indicates a bad or broken connection. Next, turn on the air conditioning or turn the steering all the way hard left or right. Once again, a rise in engine RPMs indicates a properly functioning IAC motor. To service an IAC motor with an exposed pintle, remove it from the throttle body. Clean any carbon deposits from the pintle and its seat within the throttle body with a towel saturated in carburetor cleaner. Reinstall the IAC motor, being careful not to over-tighten, and retest. Should problems still persist, you can check the resistance of the motor windings with an ohm meter. For a 2-terminal IAC motor, the reading across the terminals should fall between 7 and 13 ohms on the low scale. On a 4-pin motor, check the reading between the diagonally positioned terminals. A good motor will read over 20 ohms. Lastly, with the ohm meter set on the 20K scale, connect one lead to a terminal and the other to the IAC motor housing. A reading over 10,000 ohms should be obtained. If any readings are not within specification, replace the motor.
To replace an idle air control motor, the tools you will need include a small, flat blade screwdriver, a standard or metric wrench set. For some GM vehicles, you'll need a small ruler and, of course, the correct replacement IAC motor for your vehicle. To prevent burns when working under the hood, always start repairs with a cool engine. Begin by labeling and removing any hose or electrical connections to the air filter housing, and remove the housing if it obstructs access to the IAC motor. Not all models require this. Next, locate the IAC motor on the injection unit. Before proceeding any farther, make sure the ignition switch is in the off position. Use a small, flat blade screwdriver to release the locking tabs and disconnect the electrical harness from the IAC motor. Remove the IAC motor from the injection unit. Compare the old motor to the new one to be sure of correct replacement. The most critical area to compare is the pintle on the external type, as 3 different designs are used. One has a single taper, one has a dual taper, and the other has a blunt style of pintle. Your replacement must be the same type or drivability problems will result. Next, measure the distance between the tip of the pintle and the end of the motor housing on the new motor. It should be extended no more than 1 1/8 of an inch. If the pintle is out too far, it must be adjusted. There are 2 methods for adjustment of the IAC motors on most vehicles. This type, with a collar at the electrical connection, is adjusted by simply pushing firmly in on the end of the pintle. This type without a collar is adjusted by holding the spring down with one hand and turning the pintle counterclockwise with the other. Before installing a new IAC motor of this design, use a clean shop towel soaked in oxygen sensor-safe carburetor cleaner to remove any deposits that may be built up in the seat area of the injector. If you have an internal design IAC motor, cleaning is not recommended. With the pintle seat clean and the IAC motor adjusted, use a new gasket and screw the new motor into place. Always begin turning components in by hand to prevent cross-threading. Tightening most IAC motors requires the use of a large wrench. Be extremely careful not to over-tighten it, as damage to the IAC will result. Reconnect the electrical harness to the IAC motor, making sure it is firmly seated. Now, reinstall the air filter housing if it was removed earlier, and reconnect all hose and electrical connections. Start the vehicle and allow it to run until it reaches operating temperature. Then test drive the vehicle at a constant speed over 45 miles per hour. This will allow the onboard computer to reestablish a reference point for controlling the IAC motor.
Let's quickly recap the steps necessary to replace your idle air control motor. Always begin with a cool engine. Make sure all accessories are turned off, including the ignition key. Locate the IAC motor and disconnect the electrical connection. With a large wrench, remove the IAC motor from the injection unit. Compare the old and new motors to be sure of correct replacement. If the motor is adjustable, measure the throw distance of the old motor. Adjust the new motor to match this distance. Clean the pintle seat with a towel soaked in carburetor cleaner and install the new IAC motor in the housing. Be careful not to over-tighten the IAC motor, as damage could result. Reconnect the electrical connector and test drive the vehicle at a steady speed over 45 miles per hour to allow the onboard computer to reestablish a reference point.